If you ever had to live off the land, and I mean really do it, could you grow enough food? If you were dropped in the middle of a lush valley with a shack and land, could you do it? Could you make a garden, even a humble one, and grow food? So far, most of us haven't had to live like this, but our ancestors did have to. And I'm not talking 1,000 years ago. In the 19th century, waves of settlers came west with no money in their pockets. They came from all over the world and all throughout the east coast of America. This little house was built by them, alone in a big green valley, and with shelter checked off the list, a garden was their next necessity. So what would they plant? How would they keep it alive all the way until harvest? We've spent a year renovating this house, and now we're building this garden to explore just how it felt for them, what challenges they faced, and what challenges we will face as we ask ourselves if we could live self-sufficiently off the land. Let's dig into the garden today to plant the seeds and starts that homesteaders of old knew very well. We'll build willow wigwams from what we find by the creek, haul water by hand, stack rocks, and curse the hungry wildlife as it races to eat the food we plant before we get a chance to. We're in for a real feel of history. Okay, so I have a whole box of seedlings. So I have borage, sunflowers, and some cosmos. Now the borage is probably your standard variety. The sunflowers, those originally came from a neighbor. Who knows what variety they are? All I know is that they are perfect for this part of Montana. That's the kind of hardiness we're after in this garden. And the cosmos, well, they may disappear quickly, but if they don't, they're gonna give us some beautiful color. You can see I dug them this morning and they're already getting a little wilty, so we better get these into the ground right away. Maybe you think the story should start with potatoes or wheat. And it's true, those are staples. Those were life or death crops. And last week when this garden went in, we did plant those. And we have more staple crops to plant today, like beans and peas. But flowers and herbs, though unexpected to some, were as critical to the homesteader as any food. The yellow pioneer rose, hollyhocks, mint, marjoram, horehound, borage, thyme, lavender. They were your medicine. They were your pollinator attractors to grow the rest of your garden. And they could be used to control pests. Because wildlife out here is a real threat. Now these yellow marigolds are wonderful, if you can get them to grow. They're supposed to repel the deer. In my previous gardens, especially when I lived off-grid for years and years, I attempted to plant these all around the edge of the garden. And when I woke up one morning, I came out to find that the deer hadn't eaten them, but they had picked them up one by one and tossed them aside. And it was as if the deer were saying, we don't like this one. Can you plant something better for us? So I don't know if they repel the deer. The deer don't like to eat them, but that doesn't bode any better for the plants around them or for the plants themselves. Yet still, I'm willing to give it a shot. Because these plants are going to stand guard over the rest of the garden, and nothing can happen without them. Do you guys hear that chirping? That squeak? That is gophers literally right under the border of this garden. We fought with them last week, and honestly, I think they're doubling. That may be my first big mistake that I've made out here. Stone is wonderful. It holds heat from the sun and slowly releases it at night, but it provides hollows and shelter to certain pesky garden thieves. Man, I need to get a cat out here. You know, back in the day, dogs and cats, they weren't kept as pets. They were kept as working animals on your farm, on your homestead. So, having cats around, cats and small ratting dogs, they would handle this problem for me. There's not much I can do to catch a gopher. There would have been maybe some poison available by the 1800s that was easily accessible, but, with little kids running around, that wasn't a great option then, and it's not a great option now. The way they would have handled this was by having ratting dogs and cats, working cats. But I'm going to do my small part and put some of these herbs around this rhubarb in a desperate hope to save it. It is down to its last leaf, and probably almost no roots at this point. So in goes a culinary sage that my good friend Susan grew in her garden and gave me a little start of. We're gonna put a bunch of herbs around this rhubarb. Shy of using revolvers, cats, or poison, this might be our best bet. This part of the soil over here never got rototilled, so it takes a little more muscle. Now, we'll plant heaps more herbs and flowers today, but how would you get water out here? Even a small garden like this drinks gallons and gallons of water. We started this work with watering cans hauled back and forth from the little pond, which this spot is lucky to have, but that pond is going to dry up, and it's back-breaking work, something homesteaders knew well. For the pioneer woman, procuring the family's daily water supply was a regular part of household chores. To many women, this meant ladling rainwater from an outdoor cistern or drawing bucket after bucket from a nearby well. On more arid lands, a housewife had to trudge a mile or more to the nearest running stream, filling huge wooden buckets or barrels. She then made the long haul home again. J.C. Ruppenthal recalled, "Mother began her part in hard labor that endured thereafter almost unremittingly for 15 years, and without doubt brought her worn out to the grave at the age of 58 years. A yoke was made to place across the shoulders, so as to carry at each end a bucket of water, and then water was brought a half a mile from spring to house. Both father and mother carried water thus from day to day. When the ponds near the house contained water after showers, this was dipped up for washing and other purposes, but water to drink and cook with was held to a strict requirement of cleanliness and purity, and used only from the spring, until the well was in shape to yield ample supply." I'm using some bark mulch here that came off our firewood, anything to help hold the moisture in. Next goes the parsley. I've grown a lot of different herbs, but not this one. It's a pretty conventional one, but there's a reason we love it. It adds so much good flavor to soups, stews, and all sorts of foods. I think we could call this a staple herb. You can see down in this soil there's all sorts of bits of almost falling apart wood, just rotting into the earth. That's the remnants of that lean-to that used to be on Uncle Dan's. It had grain sit in it and rotted nearly completely away over its lifespan, so by the time we came to fix up Uncle Dan's, there wasn't a whole lot left of it, which means all that wood and grain rotted straight down into the soil, and I think that's going to provide some excellent food for these plants as they start to send their roots down. Oh, whoa! Now that's a nail. Holy smokes! All bent. That's seen a lot of life. Now, digging around in the soil here, we keep pulling up all sorts of artifacts. So we have square nails, straight out of the 1800s when this was first built, big square nails, little square nails, and even some round nails. And that's kind of what helped us date this cabin. Because when we first started, there wasn't any history written down about it. And we were able, through these nails that we keep digging up from the garden, we were able to date exactly when we think this cabin was built, which would have been between 1880s and mid-1890s, because by 1900, pretty much everything was round nail. There wouldn't have been much cause for all these square nails. We've also found rakes, probably used for the grain, when long ago this was a granary, pretty much, gosh, from the 1930s, 40s, all the way through the mid-80s. Robbie's dad remembers hauling and storing grain inside of this cabin, and look how far it's come. Now, we cook and do all sorts of pioneer projects in this house, but for a long time, it was on the edge of death. It's pretty cool though. Find all these bits of history just buried in the earth. Well, today is supposed to hit the mid-80s, which is unusual. We're at the end of May, but I think this is the hardest part about Montana. It's not that it gets so deeply cold in the winter, it's that it snaps back and forth between really cold to really hot. You can have snow on the 1st of June, or you could have 90 degrees. And there's not a lot of plants that can handle that much fluctuation. The planting you'll see today, in all its glorious hopefulness, would be tested in the following days, as on June 3rd, we had a frost. From 80 degrees one day to below freezing the next. If you depended on your garden to feed you, I guarantee you would have been up in the night with blankets and buckets of water to try to stave off that hard frost. We didn't see this one coming, so time will tell if the plants succumb to that quick snap. For now, all we can do is plant seeds in the ground and keep on moving.
That's where it's a good thing we waited as long as possible to get our peas and beans in the ground, because they won't tolerate this kind of cold. Before they can go in though, we have to visit the homesteader's building supply store, the creek bottom, because we need a way to get more space in a small garden, and that means going up. Last week we dragged rocks out here and got the first half of this garden built and planted. That took tilling the earth, forking in lots of rotted cow manure, and starting with herbs, squash, and rhubarb. The wildlife immediately noticed.
Yeah, two of them are back here.
You see two?
Where? One's squeaking back there.
Check out the start of this garden. I'll link the video at the end of this one. I don't know if these old peas and beans can withstand the wildlife assault, but we're building these wigwams to give these food crops their best shot at vertical growth.
Now this is another great trick I've been wanting to try. We went down to the creek bottoms and we cut all these pieces of willow. I'm going to attempt to make some bean and pea cages, something for them to climb up and to give them a little bit of protection from that wind whipping through. But of course in Montana, if that wind gets to really ripping, these probably aren't going to hold up.
But now many experienced gardeners are looking at this 20-foot by 5-foot plot and saying, that is not enough. And you're right, a true self-sufficient garden for a family out here would be at least an acre in size. This is a sample garden. It gives us the chance to test out what will grow, what won't grow, and what the old homestead stables would be like to actually put in the earth and try to keep alive. And hopefully get a chance to eat in the fall.
I think we're going to start with the Cherokee wax bean. So it's an heirloom variety and it's a black bean, 54 days to maturity. This should be a real taste of history.
In reading history and actually trying out the ways of history, I've come to see that although they had far more knowledge than the average man or woman today when it comes to survival skills, this was a whole new unknown environment for them. How many plants did immigrants try to grow that didn't work out? Sweet potatoes, European wheat varieties, English medicinal plants. I mean, a lot of these just won't grow here. They didn't know what winters were like. They didn't know that hail and tornadoes were common on the American plains. I mean, what must that have been like? Or grasshoppers coming in plagues.
It's a bit of an experiment. Every 4 to 6 inches in a circle around each one of these willow stalks. But I really love the idea of tasting a bean like this that has a lot of history to it.
We take for granted our weather knowledge. And I know that although today was sunny and downright hot, 2 days later would be nothing like this.
55 days to maturity, planted outdoor after the last chance of frost, which for us is about June 1st. And we're 1 day away from that. Royal burgundy bean. This one's a purple bean. These are a neat bean. I've grown purple beans before. The kids love picking them. The only bummer is they turn green when you cook them.
Around the heirloom Cherokee black beans and the royal purple beans, I've got heirloom peas to go in as well. But I also have sunflowers, little starts dug from our garden. Now, companion planting different flowers and herbs was a big part of old-fashioned garden knowledge throughout history. To plant this garden in such a harsh place, using the ways of old, well, we need to use flowers. If that sounds a bit odd, given how short we are on space, put yourself in the shoes of someone really trying to survive out here. I think I can argue for myself that one beautiful flower would lift the soul and maybe save your sanity in the face of so much hardship.
Now I'm trying not to crush all the little hollyhock seedlings that I've planted a few weeks ago.
The herbs and flowers we're planting today had one more job that the lonely pioneer woman would have treasured. As the old saying goes, we're not one step above the apes, but rather one below the angels. So to keep marching forward day after day in the face of grueling work, pain, and failure, well, a small reminder of God's beauty in the world was no doubt a life-saving crop. Accounts from those real pioneers, those first homesteaders, tell this exact tale. These short bursts from Joanna Stratton's book, Pioneer Women, put us right in their shoes and give us a taste of what it was really like. to be isolated, alone, out on the prairie, trying to be self-sufficient. The pioneer woman shared her husband's work and interest in the garden, the orchard, the crops, and the animals of the farm. She worked in the garden and gathered its products. She knew just how each vineyard or tree in the young orchard was coming in, and she shared in the hopes for a bountiful crop. Did a horse, dog, or other farm animal get badly gored, cut, or wounded? Hers was the task to cleanse the wound and take the stitches that drew the torn edges together. For these women, life was far from easy. The endless hours of back-breaking toil left little time for rest or leisure. Day in and day out, they worked in the house and in the fields to procure the basic necessities of life and to build a future for their children. At first, the heavy workload seemed almost unbearable. It was physically exhausting and emotionally draining. Over the years, however, most women learned to abide the drudgery which filled their lives, and they developed a certain fortitude and resilience which enabled them to withstand the privations and overcome the hardships.
So this is the next batch to go in. Let's do it. When you visit these old homesteads in the middle of nowhere, especially in Montana, Texas, Wyoming, you'll often find a very spiky old yellow rose known as the pioneer rose. And it's one of the roses that made its way west with the frontiersmen as they came through. I'm sure the women would have wrapped cuttings and carried them all the way out on wagon trains. And this is one of those roses that survived. It really is a survivor. And in fact, it still grows even with total neglect. Nobody to help it. If I can just get it established, I'm certain it'll be happy. But this is the delicate part. All right, I have this big bunch of lavender to go in, and there's all different varieties of lavender. Some do better in our climate than others. A lot of them are zone 5, and zone 5 works 4 out of 5 years, but usually on that 5th year, we will get a viciously cold winter, and it tends to kill off all the lavender. So, in a protected spot, it might last longer. Out here, it is not protected. So, we'll see, maybe we'll get a few great years out of this and we can propagate more. Hopefully at least one of them lives and we'll be able to restart the batch. This is a Jean Davis lavender, but I've grown all different types from English to French to modern cultivars that are designed just for the north of North America. Lavender's a wonderful plant, but around here, slightly delicate. But boy, if this works, we can make lavender scones, we can cut ornamentals to put in our house to deter pests. That actually does help with mice. It has a lot of uses, in addition to being a wonderful pollinator plant. This mint can be a bit of a thug, but most things don't like to eat it, and it makes wonderful tea, which would be a delight to anyone who had a summer cold or wasn't feeling 100%. And the other thing it's delicious with are potatoes. I watched Monty Don, this British gardener. He steamed a whole load of potatoes and threw mint in at the end, wrapped everything in a towel and served it. And I thought, wow, that must be heavenly. It's one of those things, if our potato crop comes in, I think we should try it. The next plant to try and get in around that rhubarb is this oregano. Now it's getting pretty bushy and out of control, but I'm hoping that most of the wildlife out here will not like the taste of this. Let's give it a go.
From oregano to sage, squash to peas to beans, herbs and flower seeds, the garden has moved leaps and bounds today. In fact, nearly all of it is officially planted. From seeds to starts and even a few wild plants that have been allowed to stay growing within it, such as burdock for medicinal use. We've got the bulk of our plants in. Now comes the day-to-day struggle to keep them alive.
Trying to give all these plants regular watering, that's going to be another trick too. It's just one more of the things that makes gardening out here on the frontier that extra bit difficult, but not impossible.
I hope you've enjoyed coming along on the middle of this garden journey. It's not an all-encompassing how to survive like a homesteader story. This is more of a feeling of what it's actually like trying the old ways in a remote place. Hope you've had fun being in the garden with us today. It's gonna be an adventure seeing what can survive out here in the days to come. Check out that first gardening video in the link above, and we'll hope to see you in the cabin next week. Maybe we'll roast some peanuts in the old wood-burning stove. Cheers!